Thing that's on your mind is fair game. So the number, if you were calling from New Jersey, is 201-489-WABC. From Connecticut and anywhere in New York City, it's 212-563-WABC. This Sunday, people of the Jewish faith in our city, and we've got about 1,200,000 Jews who live in New York City, more Jews here than there are in Jerusalem. Incidentally, I'm going to Jerusalem in May, looking forward to my third trip to Israel. This Sunday, people of the Jewish faith in our city and throughout the world will search their homes for crumbs of leavened bread. But for some time now, this administration and the members of what we call the KOCH coalition have been searching those crumbs who attempt to price gouge on those items necessary to celebrate the Passover holiday. You know, there's some folks that'll try to make a profit on anything. And I think it is a crying shame that there's some who would use this highly, deeply religious occasion to try to cheat people, as it were. So once again, I'm happy to report that there's this partnership between the city and the private sector in the form of this KOCH coalition, folks that have come together to try to help control the increase in prices before the Passover holiday that has affected Jewish New Yorkers in the past. As you know, what they do is await a holiday, and then everything goes up. And because those who are particularly observant are appropriately concerned that they have the proper food, there are those that, with that knowledge, will prey upon them and raise prices at this time of the year. But by collecting and providing information on prices to shoppers and by conducting outreach to wholesale and retail food firms to obtain their pledge to keep food prices stable, we've helped keep consumer costs down. And I'm very pleased about that. Our market basket surveys have found that for 77% of the items sampled actually decreased in price in the month before Passover. Now, just 3 years ago, before the establishment of this KOCH coalition, 83% of the surveyed items increased in price. So I commend the fine work of Commissioner Mark Green, the Commissioner of the Department of Consumer Affairs, and I applaud the commitment and the vigorous efforts of all those who participate in this effort. And I congratulate the businesses that took the KOCH coalition's pledge and kept their prices stable for Passover holiday consumers. I think it is tremendously important. One of the subjects that I'd like to chat about today is education, and that's why we have Carl McCall here. We have a Central Board of Education that consists of 7 persons. It is, in effect, a board of directors of a corporation that spends $7.5 to $8 billion a year. Its charge, of course, is to educate our children who constitute our future. We will have no future without our young people. And my quarrel with the Central Board of Education is that it is not accountable to anybody. And I opt for a change in the system, change in the governance, so that the Central Board, instead of the mayor appointing 2 and the borough presidents 1 each, for the mayor to appoint a majority. And there's legislation being introduced in Albany now that would achieve this end. That legislation is supported by people like Bob Wagner, former president of the Board of Education, by Felix Roeden, the chairman of the Municipal Assistance Corporation, and many others. Editorial comment has been very encouraging, because what we have now is a situation where essentially 4 people try to micromanage the Board of Education to the detriment of our children. So it is my hope that we might get to hear from some of the viewers on that subject. Carl McCall is here, and I know that he would welcome talking with you. Barry Sullivan, the Deputy Mayor for Finance and Economic Development, is a career banker, a man who had a very highly successful career here in New York City and the last 11, 12 years in Chicago, and retired. And almost upon the day of his retirement, I reached out for him, heard of him, had never met him, and urged him to take on the job as Deputy Mayor for Finance and Economic Development. It took some doing, but he was persuaded because he is civic-minded and concerned and cares. He helped in civic matters in Chicago, so we knew that we had a chance at getting him to say yes. And so he's working hard at it. I say he works with the enthusiasm of someone a third his age. And he takes his salary after taxes and gives it all to charity. So he's clearly a person who is in his position because of his commitment and concern for the welfare of his fellow citizens and fellow residents. Cesar Perales, he doesn't like me to say this, but his middle name is Augusto, so he is Cesar Augusto Perales. And it was pointed out to me that he is therefore two emperors, Caesar and Augustus. And I have given him perhaps the toughest job around in government, because he has under his jurisdiction, I suppose, about a third of our $31.9 billion budget with which he must be concerned. He's a fellow that worries about HRA and health and hospitals and the health department and on and on and on. And of course, the thing that he wrestles with now is the problem of homelessness in our country, in our city. And I think that all things considered, I think he's doing a great job. We're losing one of our very good people that is a good right hand to him, and Dr. Marcia Martin, who is going to Washington to work with Andrew Cuomo, who's at HUD, a housing and urban development, which is headed by Henry Cisneros. And so we lose Dr. Martin, but we will have in Washington Andrew Cuomo, who chaired the Mayor's Commission on Homelessness, and Marcia Martin, who worked for us. So we'll have a couple of people in Washington who clearly understand the nature of this immensely complex problem of homelessness. Now, it looks like we got some calls coming in here. I see Jimmy in Brooklyn wants to talk about the homeless. Let's talk to Jimmy.
Yes, good morning, Mayor Dinkins.
Good morning, Jimmy.
Good morning. I'd like to know, if you are reelected, will you be putting the homeless in the middle-class neighborhoods?
Well, I'm going to have Cesar Perales help me respond to you. Let me say that our desire is not to disrupt middle-class neighborhoods or any neighborhoods, but to try to find ways and means to provide shelter, housing for people, many of whom are just like the rest of us. If there's a catastrophe, a fire there, but for the grace of God, go any one of us. It can happen to anybody. We recognize that many people who are homeless have other social problems and that they need to be addressed, and that's why we maintain that it's not simply shelter, but it's the supportive services that go with it that many people need. I cannot tell you now in what specific communities all of these facilities will be placed, but we certainly are mindful of the concern that people in so-called middle-class neighborhoods, all people, African-American people, Jewish people, Italian people, Irish people, anybody in a nice neighborhood will feel that they don't want any social service agency or facility in their neighborhood. Cesar, you want to comment on that?
Well, Mayor, I think one other thing is...
yeah, Jimmy.
Is it possible where any neighborhood that has homeless or drug addiction or any problems, to have it their own neighborhood people take care of them in their own neighborhood without coming from outside neighborhoods or anything?
Well, part of the difficulty with that rationale that, like, sort of you take care of your own, and then the people who live in Wall Street say, well, why don't we just keep all our money down here in this district and not spread it around, for instance. I mean, for instance, most of the revenue is generated in Manhattan. Suppose one had an attitude of, we'll just keep the revenue here. Let Cesar address your initial question.
Yeah, I think the important thing to keep in mind is that we've had homeless, the kind of problem we have today, going on for at least 10 years in the city. And something that we have started doing over the last year and a half, I think, is unique and a different approach, and that's trying to prevent people from becoming homeless, as well as trying to deal with their social problems. Among the things we're doing, Jimmy, to keep people in their own apartments is we're coming in paying back rent. We are making sure that the people who say they're homeless really are homeless. We're looking into their backgrounds. We think that the best thing that the city can do is to stop people from becoming homeless, so that then we don't have the problem of determining where we're going to put them next. And we are doing a better job at that. I think with the support of the city council, with the patience of the courts, we're going to be able to address the problem of homelessness by preventing homeless people, by providing people who are homeless with the kinds of social help they need, so that maybe they can stay in their own communities. Ultimately, I think the solution is to create more housing for poor people. You know, in this city, we used to build public housing. We don't do that anymore. I think with the new president in Washington, we're going to begin to see more housing for low-income people, and I think that's the best way of addressing the problem of homelessness.
Thanks very much, Jimmy. I see we have Doug of Staten Island.
Hello, Mayor Dinkins.
Hi, Doug.
It's a privilege to talk to you.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you.
I do have to take issue with a comment you made, though.
Sure. Go ahead.
During the Ellis Island celebration,
Right.
you were quoted as commenting that your people came over in chains, and that you didn't have any place with the people of Ellis Island. When you say that, okay, you're supposed to be the mayor for all the people, and when you say your people came over in chains, you know that bothers me. I happen to be Puerto Rican. My mother was Puerto Rican. My father, you know, very white Anglo-Saxon, so I can see it from both angles, okay? And to me, that's a very divisive comment, and it's not something that I would expect from somebody that would consider himself a healer.
Well, Doug, I've let you get that out. Would you be interested to know whether or not I actually said that? Fact is, Doug, I didn't say that. I know that's been reported in the press, but that's not what I said. I would not make that kind of comment. Let me tell you what my attitude is about Ellis Island and all of the people who live in our city. We are a land of immigrants. We are a city of immigrants. I went to school in Harlem as a child, and we were all taught that New York City is a melting pot. Well, I don't believe that it's a melting pot. It is instead a gorgeous mosaic. And it's my observation that some of us, our ancestors, may have come on the Mayflower. Others of us, our ancestors, were here to greet the Mayflower. Some of us, our ancestors, came in ships seeking freedom of religion. Still others came in ships fleeing persecution, as our Haitian brothers and sisters do this very day. And it is true, my ancestors came in the holds of slave ships and in chains. But the observation I make is that irrespective of the ships on which our ancestors may have come, we're all in the same boat now. I did not make the comment attributed to me in the press, and I don't blame you. Had I made that comment, or had anyone else made that comment, I would be as outraged. As a matter of fact, in May, I'm going to have a major, massive fundraiser to raise money for my campaign, and that fundraiser will be held on Ellis Island. So, Michael, I'm sorry, we have Judy up first. Judy, can you hold on, Judy?
Certainly.
I'm told we got to make a break for a commercial break, and you know how it is. They got to pay the rent. I have three guests in the studio. Carl McCall, the president of the Central Board of Education, Deputy Mayor Barry Sullivan, the Deputy Mayor for Finance and Economic Development, and Cesar Perales, the Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services. Judy of Queens has been very patient in waiting, and I thank you. Go ahead, Judy.
Okay, I thank you, Mayor Dinkins. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak with you. When you very passionately condemned the verdict in the Rodney King case out in Los Angeles, and then subsequently would not condemn or did not show any outrage at the outrageous verdict in the Lemerick Nelson case, you know, the Uncle Rosenbaum case, you then distinguished the two cases by saying that in the King case there was a videotape, and in the Uncle Rosenbaum case there was not a videotape. However, subsequently, you did express a very strong condemnation of the verdict in the St. John's case, where you had perpetrators who were white, and the victim was a young black woman. In that case, there was no videotape, and yet you did condemn it. And, you know, this is hurtful to the Jewish community, and I'd like you to address that if you can.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. First off, Judy, I would hope that you and all other listeners who are Jewish and persons of like mind who may have the attitude that you just expressed, to first consider whether or not I'm entitled to any credibility at all with the Jewish community. I would remind you of my record of association with the Jewish community. I'm the fellow who, long before it was politically popular, joined with others, with Bayard Rustin and others, to form an organization called BASIC, Black Americans in Support of Israel Committee. I'm the fellow who stood almost alone and denounce some expressions made by Minister Farrakhan. I'm the fellow who's always there supporting Jewish causes. I'm the guy who went to Israel when the missiles were falling and many who were Jewish in New York did not go. I'm the fellow who, when Ronald Reagan said he wanted to honor the German war dead and went to Bitburg where some SS troops were buried, I went instead with the American Jewish Congress to Munich, spoke at the gravesite of the White Rose. I'm the fellow who has a very good, solid record of support of Jewish causes and the State of Israel. So I think you ought to have that in your mind as you assess what I've said, and let's take those one at a time.
Right. Well, Mayor, no one is calling you an anti-Semite.
Au contraire. Some have so called me.
Well, those people,
you haven't.
People are in the minority and should be dismissed.
I agree.
And that's not what we're here to...
I understand, but I didn't say anybody had called me that. I said you should keep this in mind as you assess what I have done and said. And you raised for the first time the term anti-Semitic, right?
No, I know that you like to bring that up, and there were people who irresponsibly did that. And,
but
that's
I'm
not what we're talking about.
I'm not raising that now. You are.
All right.
I'm simply saying that as one assesses, and you, Judy, in particular, since you put the question, as you assess my comments in those instances, keep in mind my background. And then I was about to go on and tell you why I did what I did. And you're the one that said nobody's calling you anti-Semitic. I didn't say you had. Oh, fair?
True.
Fair?
Great.
I'm glad you agree. Now, let me tell you about first of all, the Roderick Nelson. I hope we can agree that was a blatant miscarriage of justice. Can we?
Which case are you referring to?
Roderick Nelson. Rodney King, I'm sorry.
Rodney King. All right, well, yes.
That's not hard for you to do. I mean, it's not.
No, well, judging what we saw on the videotape,
great.
I would say
okay.
Not.
All right. Now, and when we came to the Nelson verdict, and I said that the people have spoken and whatnot, and folks said that they were outraged, that I should have condemned it, and you recall the fellow whose name I forget now, who the burglar or alleged burglar?
Yes, Mr. Nimmons, I recall.
Right. Okay. Folks said that I was wrong to condemn that as a bias incident when he was allegedly beaten by Hasidic members of the Hasidic community, and I said that the police department had so determined that. Incidentally, they've since changed their procedure with how they designate these instances. But there's a situation where he had been beaten and left lying, bleeding in the street, in the alleyway, and the police department determined that to be a bias incident. As a matter of fact, the commander who did it was himself Jewish, who so proclaimed it. I was condemned for speaking out too quickly, some said I shot my mouth off. I don't see it as the same. And with respect to the Nelson verdict, we did not have there a situation where it was so crystal clear. There's a question of whether you were in the jury, were you in the courtroom, did you hear all the evidence, and so forth. This is vastly different than the situation in Los Angeles. And that's why I said what I said. Well, I hope I've cleared it up a little bit for Judy and for those others. Now we have Michael of New Jersey who wants to talk about crime.
Yes. Good morning.
Hi, Michael.
Good morning, Mayor Dinkins. I have to disagree with you on your statistics on crime. What I think you're doing is just playing a numbers game for the upcoming election, where crime has decreased. In the subways, it might have decreased because of the overload of cops put on the subways.
Stay closer to the phone.
Because of the additional cops put on the subways. But if you look at the school systems, crime has gone up. If you look at the police officers that have been shot this year already in the city, that is, to me, a shame. I come into the city, not on a regular basis, but for work, and I have to tell you, when I come in, I'm scared to death. I don't know if I'm going to make it home. I don't know what's going to happen to me when I'm in the city.
Where do you live?
I live in New Jersey.
Where?
Waldwick, New Jersey.
Safe there, right?
Yes, it is. Very safe.
Well, let me share with you this information. The FBI compiles statistics on crime. And the FBI uses 7 major index categories that include homicide and rape, assault, robbery, a few others. And in each of the 7 index categories, crime is down in the city of New York for the first time in 36 years, and 2 consecutive years of being down. It's down in the subways, it's down in housing projects, it's down in the city at large. And your perception that crime is not down, notwithstanding, the fact is it is down. And to say that I am using this because there's an election upcoming is to suggest that I have control of the FBI. Keep in mind that even though we now have a Democratic administration in Washington, Sessions, who heads the FBI, is certainly not obliged to do my calling. And the periods during which the decline first started occurred when Bush was still president. So it's unclear to me how you think that I've been able to control this because I speak about it. Does that mean that I'm using it? It is a fact, and should not our people know that Safe Street, Safe City has produced this circumstance? It is David Dinkins and this administration that fought to get the resources to provide police officers on our street. So I hope that makes it more clear. We've got to take a break now. This is Dave Dinkins substituting for Ed Koch on the Ed Koch program at WABC. Please stay with us, and we'll take your calls in a moment. If you want to call in, the numbers from New Jersey are 201-489-WABC, and from Connecticut and anywhere in New York City, it's 212-563-WABC. I have 3 guests in the studio. Deputy Mayor Cesar Perales, the Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services, and Deputy Mayor Barry Sullivan, the Deputy Mayor for Finance and Economic Development, and H. Carl McCall, the President of the Central Board of Education. We've got a caller, Sinclair of Queens.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor. It's an honor to speak with you.
Well, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'm only 17 years old. I'm a high school senior, but there's something that bothers me, and that is there are often times, and 2 examples of this is Crown Heights, and if you remember, there was a rally against you, the police officers, after the shooting of the Kiko Garcia.
Oh, I shall never forget it,
yeah.
And I imagine nor will Rudy Giuliani ever forget it.
Right, but what my question is that there are...
He may regret it, but he won't forget it.
There are often times that there are legitimate questions posed, for example, Crown Heights and this rally, and instead of getting answers from you take the few people who may call you an anti-Semite or the few cops who may have used racial slurs and turn yourself into a victim, and that's the end of the whole story.
No, not really. Let's talk about the rally, for instance. The rally allegedly was because of an objection to my philosophy and attitude that we should have an all-civilian complaint review board. I still believe that, and as a matter of fact, we have achieved it. And the police didn't want that. The PBA didn't want that. I shouldn't say the police. I should say the PBA, because the PBA is not representative of all police officers. But Phil Caruso and the PBA leadership did not want that. They didn't want that, and they also objected to my desire to have a residency law, which we have not yet achieved, and working to get out of Albany, a residency law that would require police officers to live within the city of New York. And those were the alleged reasons for the rally. They coupled with that the suggestion that I had coddled a drug dealer, making reference to Kiko Garcia, who had been killed by Officer O'Keefe, and the suggestion that somehow or other I didn't care about the police officer. I cared only about the victim, who the person who was killed. The fact is that no one knew at that point whether he was involved in drugs or not. And what I did was call upon Cardinal O'Connor and others to go with me to Washington Heights and call for peace and calm to try to keep our city from exploding and from there being further violence, maybe even injury or death of a police officer. And for that I was condemned. The suggestion, and you paid for the funeral. What nonsense. We pay for 6,000 or 7,000 funerals a year. If you fall in the appropriate income range, the city does that. And incidentally, it's a pittance. It's a few $100s anyhow. So with respect to that's the story.
Was Yanko Rosenbaum's funeral paid for?
No, but Yanko Rosenbaum didn't need to have it paid for. It did not so apply, etc. But let me tell you about Yanko Rosenbaum. I was in Crown Heights. I was at the hospital. I held his hand. I looked into his eyes. We thought he was going to be all right. The doctors thought he was going to be all right, but they had overlooked the second wound.
Mm-hmm.
He had 2 wounds. And I've said repeatedly that Yanko Rosenbaum was lynched. He was killed because he was a Jew. We had an unfortunate circumstance where a young African-American child was killed by a Hasidic driver, but it was an accident. It wasn't intentional. But news spread like wildfire in Crown Heights that the ambulances had come and taken away the Jewish person and left the child to die. That was not true. We walked the streets to try to clarify that. And so those who, for their own reasons or through misinformation, seek to fuel this, and as you say, I try to make myself the victim, that's nonsense, my friend. When people come out and say that I'm a murderer and I'm anti-Semitic, and you know, and most of the world knows that's just not true, I am obliged to resist it. So I'm not making myself a victim. For me to disagree with Phil Caruso and the PBA is my right. But I thank you for your call.
Okay, thank you.
So that's why your legislation is very important, and I must tell you that I see growing sentiment for it. And I want to say to our listeners that there are people who represent you in Albany. You are concerned about the education of our children and their future. You should communicate with your legislators and let them know that you support and that they should support the mayor's legislation to permit the mayor to appoint a majority of the vote. We spend 25% of the city's budget, and the mayor is held accountable for education. And if he's going to be held accountable, he's got to have more influence on the board so that he can assume his rightful responsibilities.
Well, I thank you. I thank you, too, for your willingness to take on this job. Carl is a banker, and he really didn't need this headache. but his concern for our children and his recognition that they truly constitute our future is what gave us this. 1993 Mayor's Challenge Series on Saturday and Sunday, this Saturday and Sunday. The New York Mets are going to play the New York Yankees in this Challenge Series. There'll be a game tomorrow at Shea Stadium and Sunday at Yankee Stadium. The proceeds from this 2-game exhibition series benefit charitable foundations and organizations that serve our city's young people. And I'm very pleased that the New York Newsday, along with the Yankees and the Mets, are involving themselves in this effort again this year. And it'll mean some money that'll go to the city's Parks Foundation. And I think that more and more increasingly people are understanding that while intellectually and emotionally we understand that young people do constitute our future, we fail to behave that way. We just don't. And so I'm pleased that, again, this year we're going to have this series and generate some revenue to help our young people. Now, we're almost out of time, but I know that we have some more questions and some more callers. And why don't we take Mary of Manhattan, who wants to talk about welfare fraud.
Yes, hi, Mayor Dinkins. This is Mary Lynn from Manhattan. I was calling, I had the past few months I saw a report on welfare fraud and how many millions of dollars we're losing on Social Security cards that are being sold and resold and sold again. And these people are collecting on numerous amounts of cards. And I'd like to get, your opinion on what's going on. And I also have a suggestion on how to stop this.
Well, let me hear your suggestion.
Well, my suggestion is that if a card is not viable, that it can be sold, then the only thing we have to keep track of each individual person that can't be duplicated is a palm print or a fingerprint or what have you. And I suggest that we have the technology as far as computers are concerned where they have scanners. And I would think that the amount of money it would take to, even on a trial basis in New York, to take, if we're losing millions of dollars a year, and it would take less than that to put in these computerized scanners.
Well, let me just say that Cesar Perales is here with me. He has HRA comes under him. I don't know how much we lose a year. It certainly is not an insignificant amount. And, people commit crimes, and that is a crime. And any means that we can employ to stop that, obviously, we need to look at. And yours sounds like a suggestion that certainly is worthy of consideration. Cesar, what do you think?
Yeah, well, there is currently an experiment going on right now to use fingerprinting type of identification that the caller is talking about. It was tried first in California. We're not sure whether it is worth the investment, quite frankly. That's why we're doing some experimentation with it. Quite frankly, we don't lose as much money as the public often thinks as a result of fraud. We've gotten much better at reducing fraud. In fact, what happens is that people read about it when we uncover the kind of ring that you described. But there's no question that we're going to try to use modern technology and that we're experimenting with it upstate before we make a major investment in New York City.